today's session, we were doing a repeat of this tomorrow. Brandy asked if we would do that, and we're happy to do it. I did not realize we would be doing it at 8:30 in the morning, the night after the social. So I shall have a word with Brandy later. My name is Scott Anderson. I am the Senior Director for Policy at the Common Application. I'm a SACAC member. I have been for the last 8 years. We are doing these sessions at every single NACAC affiliate this spring and summer, in addition to some other conferences. This is the first one that I am doing this year, so I am very glad to be doing it here among friends. Also want to acknowledge all of this video technology that you see is so that this session can be streamed live via College Week Live, and so there are attendees not in this room who are watching us from elsewhere. So welcome to those folks as well. Let my colleague Abba introduce herself.
Well, good morning, everybody. I am also happy to be among Scott's friends. I'm Abba Blankson. I have been with the Common Application for 1 year as the Director of Communications. Prior to that, I worked in communications for a U.S. government agency, and prior to that, I worked in marketing communications and IT at a number of schools in the Northeast, all of whom happen to be Common App members. So our agenda for today, we're going to go very quickly through an overview of the Common Application for those of you who are new or are not familiar with the Common Application. Then Scott will talk about some of the trends that we saw this year. We'll get into some of the improvements and enhancements that we're making for next year. I know that's what most of you want to talk about. And then we'll have some opportunities for your questions and answers. So a little bit about the Common Application. At the core of the Common Application is our commitment to holistic selection and holistic review as the best path for college access. And this has been a commitment for many years, looking at students not just in terms of SAT scores or standardized test scores, but trying to understand the whole student and their background and their talents and all of that. The association has been around for nearly 40 years, starting in 1975. And over the years, we have grown in reach and membership and have also adapted considerably to changing technologies. One of my colleagues always laughs about the floppy disk and says, what is a floppy disk? For 2014-15, our diverse membership will have over 550 members in 47 states, increasingly international as well. We'll have over 90 public institutions and 7 HBCUs, many of whom are in this region, in the SACAC region, actually. The association is member governed, and that means that our board of directors is made up of 9 chief admission officers. We also have 4 high school counselor or school counselor representatives on the board as well. Did we introduce Carrie? Okay, so we're going to introduce Carrie right now. So we have one of our board members in the room with us, Carrie Thompson, who is a proud SACAC member for many, many years. Our board of directors is supported by 2 advisory committees. One of them, our Outreach Advisory Committee, is made up of high school counselors, community-based organization counselors, and provides input to the board on policy decisions, policy changes, and also technology. Our Applications Advisory is made up of operations and technology people from our member colleges, and primarily provides input on the technology and different enhancements that we want to make in that area. Most people know the Common Application as an online application tool. What most people don't know is that our commitment to holistic review and holistic process and promoting access goes well beyond the technology. We have been sponsors of many NACAC processes and conferences for many years. One of the things that we do is provide scholarships to counselors serving low-income or first-generation students to attend conferences such as critical components. So this is something we've been doing for a couple of years and we'll continue to do. So I want to get a sense of who we have in the audience. So how many people are from Common App member institutions? Oh, excellent, excellent. How many high school counselors or? Yeah. Awesome. I think the session will be as helpful for Scott and I as I hope it is for you. And I'll invite Scott to come up and talk about some of the trends that we saw this year.
Great. One of the groups, independent consultants in the room as well, right? That should round. We probably have others as well, but those are usually the three largest groups. So we're going to take a look back on this year. This session is designed to be very much a looking forward session, which I think is what all of us want. That wasn't supposed to be a joke. But I think it's important to, for scope, for the sense of scope, to get a sense of what happened this year. The first year of the new Common Application, CA4, as we were calling it, was trying to weigh a lot of different things. There were many, many users. In fact, if I were putting this slide together, I might throw in another many for emphasis. When you consider the applicants, the counselors, the member colleges that were interacting with the system. We'll see some numbers in a minute. When we did the session, not this session, but a session at the NACAC National Conference in Toronto, there was this great visual of a learning curve that everybody was on, and that certainly had an impact on this year. There were technology challenges, to be sure, but I think those were amplified by the fact that this system was brand new for everybody. Every aspect of it was. The system is new every year for students, right? We have a new cohort of kids coming in. But what had happened over the 6 years of the preceding system was that you, counselors, got to know it really well. And you could very easily answer questions for your students. And then suddenly, the game changed. And so not only were there challenges, but there were challenges within a new system that you were learning yourself. So in itself, just the familiarity in itself will certainly help things going forward. And with this new system, though, came a lot of different moving pieces that you can see listed here that we needed to, we and you and your students needed to contend with. Talked about scope, 35 million. 35 million represents a number as of February something. Any guesses for what that might be? Not applications. Not documents.
Help emails. Help.
I can't hear, but I'm assuming.
Emails.
Emails, no. 35 million represents the number of unique logins between August and February. I did the math quickly last night. That's about 167,000 logins a day. So there are, when we talk about scope, it's important to remember that. That's spread over equally over the time period, but really the crunch time for all of these would have been October through January, which is our biggest year. Just to take a look, we have about 1.4 million accounts that have been created this year. Some of you thought the applicants or applications numbers was at 35 million. We're not quite there yet. This number is actually closer. It's creeping in on 800,000 now. Some of these statistics are a few weeks old, but things move quickly. And then again, just to give you a sense of scope regarding what students are doing. That fee waivers number is really interesting. It's a significant increase over the number of fee waivers that we saw this year. Last year. You all know, I hope that this year we made the fee waiver selection process more streamlined for students. So I'm seeing a lot of nods from counselors, good nods, and I'm seeing some nods from members saying, boy, this really took some of us by surprise. I think many of our members have seen significant increases in the number of students requesting fee waivers as well. This is the total number so far. We need to dig into this a little bit more because I think we need to understand a bit better about what's happening there. But certainly in the spirit of promoting access, making the fee waiver more accessible to students who need it was a priority, and it's one that has certainly come to fruition. This is a slide we've shown over the last few years. It's a little small for those in the back. I'm sorry about that. But we always talk about the average number of submissions. College is getting harder every year. Your kids are applying to more and more colleges. The average number of Common App submitted by a Common Applicant this year so far is 4.3. And if you account for ED applications, so you pull out all the kids who applied ED to one college and only that college, assuming they got in and didn't apply anywhere else, at least not through Common App, it only goes up to 4.4. But when you slice and dice the data by school type and region, you see a very different picture. So if you're sitting at an independent school in the Mid-Atlantic, you're seeing something very different than you're at a public school in the South. And I find, as somebody who once worked as a counselor at an independent school in the South, I find that average number, 4.4, right on average, being really quite interesting. I think it was above average last year. In the session that I was in most recently, one of the presenters said that a private school in the South said that he had seen a decrease in the number of public school applicants from the South, and the number here is lower as well. So a lot of information to take in, but interesting to see how things differ by region. The recommender statistics are still the story going forward. It's hard to remember that 5 years or 6 years ago, I think, none of you were doing anything online. And now I think it's hard to imagine not having that as an option available to you. That bottom number, 12.5 million school forms that have been submitted online so far this year, and that's before most of you have even touched final transcripts. And you've certainly still got kids in the pipeline who are going to be applying to some more colleges. That's pretty remarkable when you think of the amount of postage and toner saved, when you think of the availability of data rather than paper that is available to colleges. It represents a significant shift just over the last few years. Very quickly, this is where our applicants are coming from. About a quarter of the applicants are coming from New York and California combined. The states that are represented in this list generally have at least one, if not more, public institutions represented, which is why their numbers tend to shoot up. California being the exception. It's interesting that California rises to number 2 without any public institutions from the state of California on that list. And then applicants by country. This is a slide that lets me talk about China. 5 years ago when I started doing this, I don't think China was above 30%. So I don't need to tell certainly enough colleges in the room the changing dynamics with regard to international students in general and students coming out of China specifically. This is who these applicants are. The gender numbers will not surprise any of you, I'm sure. About 20% this year students of color in the pool. And then going back to the access, you can see where they're coming from. 30%, almost 30% are first-gen students, and we're defining that as an applicant where neither parent has a bachelor's degree. It's a federal definition that we use for accounting purposes. And when you combine charter and public schools, 75% of the applicants are still coming through the public schools. So that's really interesting. All of this is taking place within larger demographic trends. Those numbers down the bottom about where the college enrollment, in what age groups college enrollment is expected to increase, that has implications for the Common Application for all of us, but for Common App specifically as we think about how well the application serves the students who are using it. We are seeing more adult learners, we are seeing larger numbers of transfer students. That's certainly something that we are trying to pay more attention to. Historically, we have been an application that has served the traditional age college-going application, students coming right out of high school into college. That's changing, and we need to make sure that whatever changes we are making going forward acknowledge and reflect those changes. So I'm going to let Abba take over for a few more slides.
Thanks, Scott. So over the last couple of months, we've heard from all of you in many different ways. We've heard from you in responses to our daily updates. We've heard from you on listservs, the NACAC exchange. We've heard from you on social media and more social media. but and quite honestly, we're reading all of that, we're paying attention to it, and we are acting on a lot of the feedback that we're receiving. Some of the things that we have been talking about are these guiding principles, and these are the principles set by our board of directors as to how we're going to make decisions and the foundation on which we're going to be moving forward, and the importance of regaining everybody's trust, making sure that the technology is reliable, understanding the role the communication plays, the service, and then also serving the needs of both our members and our students, parents, and counselors. Sometimes those are at odds with each other, serving members and serving student parents and counselors, but we're trying to make all of that work. So a couple of things that we heard loud and clear this year, and these are things that we're actively trying to address in the new system. The first thing is about the green checks. So we saw a lot of questions about green checks. When do I get it? When do I not get it? How come I've completed all the questions and I'm still not getting my green check? And so we're really looking into how to make that process better. The need to be able to see your work before you submit it. We heard a lot about that, a lot about logins, the essay response, and particular errors. So these are all things that we're trying to address, and I'll let Scott talk more about some of the enhancements that we're making.
So this just in. Alba talked a little bit earlier about the advisory committees that we have that help us review suggestions that come in. Suggestions come in from all quarters. Certainly we hear from members, we hear from counselors, we hear from applicants. People generally reach us through the Help Center, and we'll show you that soon. I wanted to acknowledge also, he probably doesn't want me to do this, but I'll do it anyway. Scott Chrysler from Episcopal School of Acadiana is one of the counselors on the Outreach Advisory Committee. So he's been extremely helpful in all of these conversations. I don't think there are any other Southern members on the committee that I recall. But it is a diverse committee. Every year, even taking a step a few years back, we get lots of suggestions, some really big suggestions, and we try to implement them in a thoughtful, responsible way. This year, we've also gotten a lot of suggestions. This year is about stability and about reliability and about restoring confidence. If you think back to the history slide that Abba showed just a few minutes ago, Common App's been around for 40 years, and since 1998, we have been in the technology business. Over that time, I am very confident in stating that we established a very strong track record of reliable service. This year did not live up to that standard. Next year will, and that is our commitment to you. In order for it to live up to that standard, we are addressing the pain points that counselors saw, that applicants saw, and certainly that members saw. We're not going to talk a lot about the member-facing issues here. We'll have other forum in which to do that, although I'm certainly happy to entertain any questions from our members who might be in the room. But this is where we saw for applicants the biggest issues. We did retain the essay topics. That was, oh, the good old days when we were talking about topic of your choice, right? We retained the essays this year, and we did that, one, because we didn't even have a year of data on what students were writing about. And absent any compelling reason to change the prompts, we did not. We will revisit them every year. Revisit doesn't necessarily mean change, but that I think was important. We heard a lot of feedback from counselors this year who were very grateful that they would not change because it led to some stability to the process. The essay formatting will change next year. We will be using a third party to help manage that. We built something internally. It was challenged, to say the least. Throughout the year, it certainly improved, but that's something we know needs attention, and it should be a much easier process for everyone next year. The Green Shack Zaba has already addressed. The majority of the time, they worked just fine. There were certain edge cases where students would answer some questions, save some work, go back in and change the work, and there was kind of a phantom answer sort of hanging out there that prevented a check from showing up. And there was always something that we could help them fix, but we needed to know it was affecting them so we could go in and fix it for them and then submit. We're doing work on that to make sure that frustration does not persist. The print preview function is certainly something that we heard a lot about. The fact that students, it's not till the end of the application process and indeed during the submission process when students can go in and see a copy of their work. That was actually never the intention of that. Next year going forward, we will have a more robust review, I will call it, process to allow students to see what their application is going to look like much earlier in the process. There were some problems, as you know, with payments, payment reconciliation. That was something that was relatively short-lived, but it had some lasting ramifications. We know what caused it in working with our third-party vendor, so we're confident going forward that we are aware of those issues so that we can address them before things begin. Confirmation emails, we will be reviewing all of the text of those to make them as clear as possible regarding what has been submitted, what has not been submitted, steps that need to be taken next as well. The early decision agreement confirmation is going to be something we're going to be clarifying a bit for students. And then just general improvements to the text of the questions themselves. We got really good suggestions, some of which we implemented throughout the course of the year, just to clarify. That's something that we have always done. If we have a new question and find out as students are actually working on it that they're not seeing it through the lens that we thought they would see it through, we've always taken the liberty of adjusting the text to make it more clear. We are taking a fuller approach to that. We've got our advisory committees helping evaluate all of that for this year. So that's the applicant system. The recommender system, there aren't going to be, except for a few text changes here and there aren't going to be any changes to the first year forms. There will also be an opportunity for counselors to review their work earlier in advance. And I should point out that these, there's going to be another slide like this shortly. Most of these pertain to the Common App school form system as opposed to Naviance. How many Naviance users do we have in the room? Quite a few. How many of you use the Common App online system? Okay, yeah. The transfer forms, this is probably something that member colleges, it will resonate with you more than with high school counselors in the room. We brought the transfer process online this year, transfer school forms process online. It was modeled after the first year process, which was the only process that we knew. It was a faulty comparison. It created headaches for members, it created headaches for registrars. We are looking at a wholesale revision to that entire process. We are actively gathering input from transfer advisors at member colleges, also transfer advisors at two-year colleges and the residential registrar community. We were just at, one of our colleagues was at ACRO earlier this week, it was He was not among friends, shall we say. But it was good, very helpful conversation, and we will use that going forward. Also clarifying some of the confirmation emails, and then similar to what I mentioned with the first year or the applicant system, some general improvements to the questions themselves.
So it looks like most of the counselors in the room are Naviance users. So as Scott mentioned, these tips and reminders do not apply to you. But for the folks who are using the Common App Recommender system, one of the tips we wanted to share with you is to let your students know what email address they should use when they invite you as a recommender. So as you know, the student invites you as a recommender, and then there's a link in that email that then allows you to create your account or set up your profile. You do have to set up your profile and have that completed before you are able to submit any forms. Sometimes counselors were not seeing a submit button, and it was because they hadn't completed the profile, which they needed to do. There are a couple of other tips here. We post tips on our Facebook and social media and Twitter pages. We will also post this presentation on our support website, so you can get these tips there as well. We're going to be improving and enhancing the support that we provide for members, counselors, and students. The first thing, of course, is just improving the text of some of our knowledge-based articles. We found that some of the information was not always complete, and so we're going to be improving that. We will also offer more training sessions and webinars for members and counselors, as well as videos. We are committed to implementing chat support. That's something that folks have asked for and think will be helpful. It's likely that we'll do a soft launch or a phased rollout of chat support, perhaps rolling it out to members as our smallest user group, and then to counselors, and then to students. As Scott mentioned before, the learning curve that we had this year. So now all of you are experts on using the recommender system and can help your students, your parents, the teachers in your schools and districts as well. We included the URLs for our support pages here: app support for students and rec support for counselors. We definitely welcome suggestions, feedback, compliments, anything. Always. You can go to recsupport.commonapp.org and put in any thoughts that you have. Really, as I mentioned before, we gather all of those, we read them, review them for system enhancements. Scott mentioned our outreach advisory group that prioritizes those, so don't be shy ever about submitting your suggestions and feedback. Over the next, we're going to be providing ongoing communications. Of course, Scott mentioned that we will be presenting at all of the regional ACACs in the spring and summer. We also have our monthly newsletter that we have been sending out for numerous years. If you are not on the newsletter list, you can go to recsupport.commonapp.org to get on that, or you can see me after the session and I will help you get on the mailing list. Of course, as I mentioned before, we're going to continue to post to our social media pages. In the next couple of months, we're also going to be launching a blog to provide additional information for our members, counselors, and students. Occasionally, I will be reaching out to folks, counselors and members, to write on a particular topic. So if you are interested in writing a piece about the Common App or your experiences with the Common App for the Common App blog, please see me after the session so I can give you some information about that. So we talked about the Common Application mission. We went over the trends for the last year. We talked about the enhancements for the coming year, and now we have lots of time for your questions and feedback. Scott and I will be happy to take those.
Yeah, it looks like there's a mic going around. I think this is so that folks online can hear. Hey, Nancy.
Yeah, I have a couple of questions. One, I have a transfer student this year, and he invited me to be a recommender, so I guess even though we use Naviance, I can't do that. But when I they had me create a password then, and I tried to log in and it wouldn't let me. I don't know what that means, whether it could be my inabilities, because I don't always do it the right way. So that's one question. Another is just to beg colleges. I thought we were promised last year that we would have the supplements by August 1st. And there were a fair number of colleges that didn't have them, so I'm asking please for colleges to do that.
Yeah, thank you, Nancy. Let me take the second part of that first, because we need to take our own responsibility, the organization does, in that. Think back to the former system where there were standalone supplements. Common application would launch on August 1st. There were a lot of supplements that would launch on August 1st as well, and there were many that would not, because colleges were doing their own revisions, refinements on forms, and the goal was always to get things up by Labor Day. We should have perhaps more accurately positioned the new system as on August 1st, we would have the capability to host all supplements that were available. Except that we didn't have that capability. There were some challenges that came up our colleges had to contend with. So we take ownership over that. There were also some members that were still refining things as well. So that piece of it didn't go away, but we do need to take that responsibility as well. As far as the transfer piece, that I perhaps afterwards can connect you with someone who can assist you. It is true, however, you bring it up in the context of transfer, being a Naviance user, but not being able to submit transfer documentation through the Naviance system. Same would go for, I don't know if any of you had encountered the situation where perhaps you're a Naviance user, but you were invited to be an other recommender. That was a new feature that we added this year. One of the aspects, we did that in response to members we have some members who require peer recommendations, clergy recommendations, and there's really no home for those recommenders within the online system. And colleges wanted that because they wanted the same online capabilities for those recommenders as they have for counselors and teachers. In the old system, there were exactly 3 combinations of recommender types that you could be, because it was you were either a Naviance person or not. You were either a teacher or a counselor. Now, there are 149 of them, 149 combinations of things that you can be. When you just do the math, you could be online, offline, Naviance, non-Naviance, both. And that has created layers of complexity that were never intended. And it was layers of complexity that were added in service to you all based on things that had been asked for. But it's something we're still wrapping our minds around. We've got our minds pretty well wrapped around it now, but that complexity contributed to some of the challenges you saw and may be impacting what you're describing. I'm just going to defer to our colleague with the mic in the back.
Hey Scott, Steve Saab. Obviously, without flogging a dead horse, there were lots of problems with the essay submission component. You mentioned that earlier. Can you tell us a little bit more about what we can expect from this third-party, software that y'all are going to be using for that?
Yeah. Very simply, consistent font sizes, consistent spacing, consistent formatting, everything that you would want in a friendly, legible document, that will exist.
One of the things we were told a year ago is we'd be able to use Word and have kids paste. Is that going to be one of the functionalities of this?
I'm not going to answer that because I can't answer it with 100% knowledge, and I don't want to say something that may be incorrect. Certainly, the concept of cutting and pasting is something that we absolutely want to support because that's what makes the most sense. Kids are doing their writing in Word, in Pages, wherever they're doing it. We need to be able to support that. That's not a conversation that I've been a part of in terms of what the specifics are. I can tell you that it's a priority for us. I can get an answer to you on that specifically after this conference when I'm able to talk to people who have more specific knowledge about that. but it needs to happen. It's a priority for us, definitely.
I have two questions. In the prior Common App, we were able to get PDFs of the application, the teacher rec and the counselor rec, and I couldn't find it. Is there going to be an easier way on a tab at the top that we could find the blank documents to see the questions?
There were no, so this year was the first year that we retired the paper application and all the paper forms. Paper still existed, but not in sort of the blank, look at it, fill it out as sort of a test practice kind of education kind of case. We did put some resources in place to address some of those concerns. I'm not sure that they were sufficient. And so that is a conversation that we are revisiting. I can't commit to that right now. I do know it's something that we've been asked quite a bit about. You saw the enhancements that I talked about, which seemed like a very short list, but when you get down to the code level, there's a lot of significant stuff in there in addition to the things that we're doing for members. What you're describing is a decision that it's a decision that needs to be made and communicated. There's not the same kind of time sensitivity to that because it's not a development kind of process. If we decide to bring back paper, we can just do that. And when we make a decision on it, we certainly will announce it broadly.
The other question is, since I couldn't find something to show them what the questions would be, what I did was I filled out the application. And when I filled out the application, I put the name of a high school counselor as a recommendation. I never submitted the application, but 2 hours later, she wrote me an email saying, I see you're applying to X college. And I know these kids, since they never even sent off an app, did not expect that counselor to get that recommendation before they've even talked to them.
Well, that's actually not a change from what has happened in the past. There's always been an invitation. This is not for Naviance users, but for counselors in the Common App system. There's always been an invitation process to invite a counselor or invite a teacher that's online. Philosophically, we agree 100% that process needs to happen in consultation with an actual conversation with that individual. But if you went and invited a counselor, that counselor would have gotten an email.
Even before it's submitted?
Right, even before it's submitted, because the counselors and teachers can do their work on the recommendations before students submit.
Hi, I'm Pam Fetters. I'm from the Lovett School. This is not actually something new, but it's something ongoing since we're at SACAC in the Southeast, in the South. I know you serve a lot of different schools and constituents across the country, but opening on August 1st is really a hardship for schools in the South. Many of us run workshops in the summer for our students, and our schools start in mid-August, if not before. So that doesn't leave us much room to expose our kids in workshops to the Common App. And it was an especially difficult thing this year because of the new design.
I think this is Pam, thank you for that. I think is the 4th year that we have launched on August 1st. Prior to that, it was July 1st. And it certainly is a regional consideration. What I can tell you is that when the board made the decision to move from a July 1 launch to an August 1 launch, it was to provide some extra development time to make sure that things could be up and running and functional for everybody when the system launched. This year, obviously, it was an aberration with all of that, but that was the philosophy behind it. What we know is that if you look at the very last year that we launched on July 1, between July 1 and August 1, there were only 11% of the people who would eventually go on and create accounts that year created one. So we felt that we had some statistical support for maintaining that given the development needs that we had. The long-term goal, and I think it's fair to say it's probably the short end of the long term, is to have a system, and see if it was built this way, but we were not able to implement it now, is to have a system that has overlapping cycles. So that if you imagine the year that we're currently in, if it could run through, let's say, Labor Day to accommodate late summer applications, transfer applications for the fall, but then earlier than that, maybe July, certainly August, the new system could open up, and that would give us some flexibility for addressing what you're requesting. I hear you, and as a someone who used to be a counselor in the South, I understand that. I mean, we do try to provide as many resources as we can. And to go back to the last question, because I want to address this resource specifically, if you go to the help center, and you can't see it very well, but that last tab on the right is the training resources tab. The resource that we had put together last year, and it still exists there, is the counselor training guide, and it essentially takes all of the, not every single question that students face, but every category and sort of flavor of questions that students would encounter. So, there's an explanation that you're going to be asked about your family and your parents, and where they went to college, and when they went to college, and how many siblings you have, and all of that. So we try to, in a distilled format, replicate the questions in a way that would at least provide you a counseling tool, because, I mean, face it, the paper application ceased long ago to be an application that people use, right, to send it. They happen every year. It really was more of an advising tool, and we put that document together with the assistance of the Outreach Advisory Committee. We knew it wasn't going to be perfect, because the first year of anything is not going to be perfect, but we do want to revisit the issue that you brought up.
So we do have a couple of online questions. I'll just read one that hasn't been addressed yet. So will there be the ability to have an automatic reminder for mid-year reports to be submitted, whether this is initiated by the student or the system itself?
That's not something that is in the planning. Mid-year reports, because they vary so significantly from school to school, from college to college, who requires what, and what school policies are. That's not something that we intend to implement.
Scott, what new colleges will be joining in 2014 to 2015?
What new colleges will be joining? That is a great question, and I cannot answer them all off the top of my head. What I can tell you is that we just on Thursday sent out our counselor update, and in that counselor update it has the full list, and we posted it to our Facebook page and Twitter, I assume, also, just on Thursday and Friday. So if you link to the letter there, then you can find the complete list.
Hi, we are a Naviance school, and this is my first year using Naviance and the new Common App. I guess my frustration was I never knew if my documents got there. And so, and because when we use Naviance, we don't have a Common App account, I can't even go in and look to see if they're there. So is there something being put in place that says, yes, Lisa, it got there?
Yeah, I mean, the Naviance integration is always challenging, and it was especially challenging this year because they had to adjust to our new processes as well. Our development delays impacted them, which in turn impacted you. What you're asking for existed. There were certainly times when documents were submitted, colleges couldn't find them. That had to do with how forms are submitted, or rather downloaded, thank you, on their end. We worked through a lot of that, and so next year we know what needs to happen for that uncertainty to not be there for you. So this is one of those, there are a lot of enhancements that we are making this year that no one will ever see. We can't show them to you, but what we can say is we're putting the fixes in place to make sure all of those things that vexed you on a regular basis work on a regular basis. That goes back to the stability, the reliability, which has been the driving credo, if you will, of this entire development cycle for the second year.
I just have a follow-up to that. As a Naviance user, when we submit documents to a non-Common App school, we can see in our submission status page a confirmation number that says that's arrived. And we use that if a college that is having a hard time matching, we give them that confirmation number and the problem solved very quickly. But for the Common App schools this year, we did not have a confirmation number. Is that, as you're talking about making fixes, is that something that's going to be available to us? And I don't know if that's on the Common App end or on the Naviance end.
Yeah.
I don't know who fixes that.
Right, and I hate we get a lot of Naviance questions, and when we listen to them and we do our best to determine, is this a Common App issue, is this a Naviance issue, and there's always a gray area in the middle, and that's where you guys get stuck and you feel sometimes like you're ping-pong back between both organizations. It's certainly, we're not trying to pass the buck to the other. I think sometimes we have an incomplete understanding of the underlying issue of what's being asked. Even if the way it's being presented is clear, the underlying issue may not be clear to us. So I want to acknowledge that, because I think that's something many users have faced in the past. I do not know enough about the Naviance interface to know exactly what you will be able to see. So that's not a question that I can answer. It's a question that we can follow up on. Maybe you can, a lot of Naviance users in the room, is that something that you had in the past? Some sort of a confirmation number or something from Common App submissions?
I had, when I would submit in Naviance Common App, it would say submitted, and I could tell that the university had gotten the information, because when they pulled it from Common App, my status changed to Naviance to deliver.
Yes, so just for the folks, right, for the folks online, the comment from the back about the status being updated within Naviance in the past. I know there were absolute challenges with that this year. I know the status does get reflected somehow in Naviance. I don't know if there's a number to be able to point to it. I'm sorry, I don't have that information for you. I think we have time probably for one more question. This is a shorter session, right?
Beverly Brooks with St. George's Independent School. I actually have two questions, but they're related to the same section. First, on the extracurricular section, is there a conversation about making one of those areas not required, since it seems like students, when it comes to involvement and then a description, end up repeating themselves? And secondly, is there any conversation about taking the Naviance resume and having it inputted into the Common App?
The answer to the second question is no. There is not. Colleges that wish to solicit a resume from students can do so through their member pages, but that function no longer exists, and there are no conversations about enabling that with Naviance. To the second question, first question about making one of those fields not required, we're not specifically. I know we're looking at that whole section to make it a little bit easier, because what you're bringing up is something that we heard students were repeating themselves. So we're fine-tuning it. I don't know that we're fine-tuning that, but the fine-tuning that we're putting in, I think, will help alleviate that. The other thing that we're doing, and some of you encountered it this year as well, there are certain sections of the Common Application that are whole sections, testing, extracurricular activities, that all colleges want, and you want your kids to fill out, but they're not required. And so the challenge that we ran into was we had these green checks showing up, and some students saw the green check and kind of forgot, I never filled out my extracurricular activities. They just assumed it was done. And so we're implementing some leading questions in each section to force students to go into that section, answer it. Are there any activities that you'd like to report? Yes or no. If they answer no, I don't know why they would want to do that, but if they answer no, then the green check would appear, but not before that point. So that's one of the green check issues that we were talking about earlier. Rick, yes?
Matt, we don't need to record this file. I just wanted to say something you probably haven't heard a lot, which is I really genuinely appreciate the shift in communication that occurred. Obviously, some of that was forced, I understand that. But just to tell you that we appreciate the transparency and the responsiveness that definitely was noticed in these cycles. And looking around the room, it's, we talked a little bit about how many first timers there are, and there's probably none of them in the room now. Maybe I'm wrong, but it looks like that's not the case. So let me just say that we kind of hold you to the same standard that we hold each other, that honesty and transparency, basically diminishes anxiety. And so for those of you here who often are quoted in the press, let me just say that this is going to happen again next year somewhere. It hopefully won't be the Common App. Maybe it'll be another application provider. Maybe it'll be a particular school. But I think that, we're all trying to keep people's anxiety low. We're trying to work together to, help this process be smooth and ultimately to serve the students. So, A, I appreciate the example you guys set in the middle of the cycle. And B, please, I just want to urge you on both sides of the desk to keep hyperbole out of the press. Because it only serves to drive the anxiety that we're ultimately trying to diminish in a local scale. So thanks for the example, and hopefully in the year ahead we can all keep that in mind as we kind of work together to serve students better.
Thank you, Rick. I cannot think of a better way to end, so thank you for those points. Please do fill out your session evaluations, and I think there will be someone in the back to take them. If not, you can leave them on your chair.